We have good news. These deliberations lasted, as you know, until 3 in the morning. They were full of emotions and disputes, but I left the European Council building with satisfaction, as the one who advocated for using these frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine. This project was very difficult from the beginning. Some were worried about potential negative consequences for the member states that have these Russian assets on their territory. Belgium, in particular, expressed some concerns, but it is known that this is the conclusion of the work, so I can say with great relief and satisfaction that Ukraine will enter negotiations with Russia about peace, or at least a truce with strong arguments. These strong arguments are the 90 billion euros that Ukraine will receive. These are European funds from the so-called headroom. That is this reserve, a flexible reserve of our EU budget, which did not belong to any German, French, or Polish portfolio, was available for use in some particular situation. Poland will not contribute financially to this endeavor, apart from the fact that this is, of course, a part of the European budget. What is important is that this is a loan for Ukraine, and Ukraine will repay this loan only when, after the end of the war, it will be possible to access these currently permanently frozen Russian assets. It sounds complicated, it is not some exciting story, but in conclusion, it can be said that it is Russia that will pay for the damages. It is Russia that will pay for the losses suffered by Ukraine, a country attacked by Russia. And that was the point. There are no winners or losers here. The Czechs, Hungarians, and Slovaks, as countries with a more arguably pro-Russian stance, were mentioned. That is what they meant as those who do not join this, but in fact, they are joining to the same extent as any other member country, because they also contribute to the European budget. We are discussing whether the upcoming, hopefully, negotiations with the Russians under the patronage of the Americans and with the participation of the European Union will be negotiations about peace, or whether they will be negotiations about the terms of Ukraine's capitulation. Without these funds, which will help finance Ukraine's defense effort, in fact, Ukraine would be negotiating the terms of capitulation. Thanks to our decision, there is a chance that these negotiations will be about peace, not on Russian terms, but on terms that can somehow be accepted and deemed acceptable by all parties involved in the conflict. What will the future be? We'll see. Obviously, the war continues. It is well known how unstable and changeable the main actors of this whole drama can be, so I cannot say today what the outcome will be. But certainly, the starting point for negotiations today for us, because for Ukraine, and therefore for us, is much better than before the European Council's decisions. I can say with full responsibility that through a collective effort, including with our MEPs from Poland, we have achieved this effect. I don't want to say that we've pulled the teeth of Mercosur, but its consequences will not be dramatic for Polish farmers. And where they do arise, the Union will be obliged to various forms of safeguards, protection, and assistance. Among other things, we expect possibly to increase the pool, including funds in future financial frameworks for agriculture. And here we are jointly cooperating with Italy and France. It is possible that this additional pool will also help to neutralize any potential negative consequences of Mercosur. The direct use within this mechanism, called the reparation loan, direct use of Russian resources at this moment. And here, legal doubts arose. Some were looking for excuses not to touch it because they were afraid. Well, yes, it was a very turbulent discussion. And of course, the Prime Minister of Belgium was the main obstacle regarding the possible direct use of the funds, because Belgium has the most of it. So we obtained a solution that invalidated some of the arguments of countries like Belgium, while at the same time giving them a sense of security that they would not be exposed to any financial and legal consequences. The matter is so complicated that, to be honest, there are no outstanding experts, because we are taking a path that has not been explored before. It is known that these are unprecedented decisions. For us, it is very important, I am talking about this, not I would not risk this thesis if it were not for my 100% certainty, and as you can imagine, I was very vigilant during these internal EU negotiations. The decision to permanently freeze Russian assets was made precisely so that we can use them at the appropriate time. Russia can no longer use them, and we will use these funds when Ukraine repays the debt with these funds. This is the intention. These are the conclusions. What history will show and what the fate of this endeavor will look like in the future, we will see. No one here will say that on 100% is sure which scenario will win, but for today, securing Ukraine has become a fact. I can say with great satisfaction that what Russia feared the most, namely that Ukraine would be able to continue financing its defense, has become a fact thanks to the decision of the European Union. Moreover, I tried to explain very precisely what it entails. What is the involvement of European countries in this loan? This involvement is equal for all, meaning proportionally equal for everyone, because this loan will be paid from already long-established and funded flexible reserve by all European Union member states, the so-called headroom. So regardless of how much the Czechs, Hungarians, and Slovaks insisted on having a provision indicating that they do not have anything to do with it, in practice, and I truly know what I'm talking about here, all countries contributed to this loan by contributing to the European Union budget, because this loan comes from the flexible reserve of the budget that was adopted years ago and funded by all member states, including Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. However, I am in no group, meaning I am. The Polish position has been clear from the beginning, meaning Mercosur does not suit us, because we are a country interested in protection, particularly when it comes to beef production, but not only our producers. But being against it at the same time, I work with those who are either against or at least want to improve this agreement. And we have adopted a strategy that must ultimately bring practical results, not just slogans and calls. Returning to the issue of the loan for Ukraine and the frozen Russian assets. It was quite a long saga, and in fact, that we made this political decision that the Russian assets would be used to repay this loan is the maximum that could be achieved. I did not announce any success here. I am not in euphoria. For many hours, it was uncertain whether at all we will be able to describe how these funds will be used. And I do not know whether the Prime Minister of Belgium has mobilized the entire nation. I am not responsible for what happens in Belgium. I can say not all the arguments, to put it mildly, convinced me, and when I spoke, it was probably the most brutal voice of all. And I wanted to make those who were discussing aware that they were talking about their own money and interests. And in this part of Europe, we are rather talking about how to survive and how to preserve independence, not only of Ukraine, but also of the countries on the eastern flank. And what was achievable, we achieved. Ukraine is under great pressure from Russia, the war, but it is also under pressure from the United States. It is the United States that wants to achieve peace as quickly as possible. For us, the most important thing is that peace, any possible future truce or peace, does not mean capitulation, because it would directly threaten our security. And most importantly, for Ukraine and for us, was that Ukraine could say, "We will not surrender. We are ready to keep fighting unless the peace terms are acceptable." That was what the game was about, and what the Prime Minister of Belgium and the Chancellor of Germany and others are trying to explain who won and who didn't.